Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on Fridays with FOB. And we're here again with a very interesting topic. And also, I have a very amazing speaker who's going to talk to us about the Power Platform and enhancing your security in the Power Platform. All right, so before we get started, I would like to introduce Himad. Iman is a well experienced Power Apps developer for so many years now, doing amazing developments in Power Apps, Canvas, model driven, JavaScript, extending, you name it. And he works with Avanade here in Ireland. And today he's going to talk to us about two major things: the customer managed keys and the IP firewall rules, right? So you wonder what that is about. Please sit back for the next 30-ish minutes and we'll hear more about it. And we're not just going to be talking today, we're also going to be presenting and doing cool demos as well. I hope someone is as excited as I am. All right. So, Imat, over to you.
Thanks, Fine, for a wonderful introduction. It's always great working with you, and thanks for inviting me to this session. And yeah, let's get back to the presentation. I'll try to share my screen. Yeah, please give me a heads up when you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great stuff. Great. Yeah, welcome all. So today we are briefly discussing on two topics, majorly on our data security for Power Platform. So the first topic is on the IP firewall Power Platform environments, and next one is on the customer managed key, and we'll go through them one by one. So let's discuss more on the IP firewall Power Platform environments. So recently, Microsoft has given us a feature to enable the IP firewalls from the Power Platform Admin Center, which gives us a great advantage to restrict any computers who wants to access our dataverse through a specific IP ranges, right? First, let's talk about what is an IP address and why do we need the IP addresses. So to everyone who is new in the technological space, IP stands for Internet Protocol. So just like how a person has a name, so every computer has an IP address and it's unique. So it comes with two different formats. One is the IPv4 and the IPv6. So IPv4 is basically a 32-bit address, and IPv6 serves more addresses as we have millions of devices connected. So we had to switch over to IPv6 because IPv4 couldn't accommodate all the possible addresses. Right. And so IP addresses are very important because in order to talk to each other over the internet, we need IP address. Right. So let's get on to the uh, firewall. So think of firewall as a barrier to enter any house. So if you have the key, then only you can enter the house. So let's talk what is IP firewall in the Power Platform. What does it mean to us? So any person whom we specify that he's allowed in the IP range can access the dataverse, and any person who doesn't fall under our IP range cannot access the dataverse. So that's briefly on the IP firewall. So no one with an so you can think of it as any malicious user or anyone who is from an untrusted source cannot access our dataverse, which gives us a great advantage to enhance our security, right? Now let's move on to the topic on how to enable this feature, right? So since we now understood that what is IP firewall and IP addresses, now we need to understand where can we enable this cool feature. So as a power, there are three things we need to be taken care of in our mind. One is that you need to be a Power Platform admin in order to enable this feature, and also the environment has to be a managed. So this gives us a great ability that any environment, if it is managed, it has its own perks and benefits, right? Now, if you go to your environment and go to the environment which you want to enable the firewall, so you can go to the settings of your environment and then move ahead on the privacy plus security, where you can see the IP addresses setting. And you also see a cool feature called as enable IP address based firewall. And when you toggle this to yes, you'll see a set of options, which is the IPv4 ranges. So you can specify the IPv4 ranges in the CIDR format. So, and if you want to specify a range, you can separate them by a comma and you can list all your IP ranges, right? Now let's go ahead and see the demo where I can talk more on the other options which you can see here, and let's see how we can show it in live and how it works in real time, because this cool feature is really interesting because any action you perform here is really live. I mean, you can see all the results on real time. So let's go back to the window. So first I'll head over to my environment. If you can see, I have a couple of environments on my tenant, and I'm currently focusing on the developer environment. And if you can see, my type of environment is managed set to yes. If it is no, then you can't enable this feature. So you have to make sure that your environment is managed. And if you are unaware on how to enable your environment to manage, you can just select your environment and click on this enable manage, and it will enable it for you. Now let's head to our environment which we are focusing on. So if you see, I have my environment details here and there are a couple of options. So I would first go to the settings in order to see my privacy and security, which I was talking before. So let's head to the product, and then you can head over to the privacy plus security, where you can see all the cool features. Now let's head straight to the enable IP based firewall. If you can see, I can enable this feature, and also I have a set of ranges in the CIDR format, and I can also enable some list of service tags. What this means is, let's say if you want to talk to Azure Active Directory or Azure DevOps or any of the services which are listed here, and if you check, let's say if I want to check the Azure Cosmos DB, if it wants to connect, I can just check it, this box. And what this would mean is, even though if the IP range is not in the listed, it can still talk to the database environment, which means it can bypass the firewall policy which we have set up on the environment, and it can still talk to our database. So by default, you can select all the environments and you can select all the service tags which can talk to our Dataverse. And then let's go to allow access for Microsoft Trusted Services. These are basically for monitoring purposes, or you can think of a support user, because whenever you raise a request to Microsoft support, they often ask you whether they can access the support instances or any other environment. So this is crucial for them to access the environment without any firewall restrictions. So by default, you can set this to yes because they are the trusted services. Then we have the application users. Few of the application users are the first party, which Microsoft have them by default in our application who can access our environments, and also any third-party application who users whom we create in the Azure portal to access any of our functions or any of our security groups and so on. And the third feature is very cool because if you're a new person to this feature and if you want to try out first to see how it works out, so this is like a detection mode. You can enable this firewall. What this means is any person can enter your environment and he can just log in, which would this would mean that you will get to know who are the users who are trying to log in, and you will also get to know their IP addresses. So you can specify a range of IP addresses what you would need in order to give them the access to Dataverse. So reverse proxy address. So if your organization is having a reverse proxy address, then you can also mention it here in the CIDR format, and it would also bypass your firewall policy. Now, let's check what are the security settings in my another environment just to see how it works in real time. So currently I've set up one of the IP range here and I'm trying to save this. Click on save and I'll just try to go and check my environment if I have access to it because I'm trying to allow only list of specific range, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not in this IP range and my IPv4 range is different than this. So technically I should not have access to the environment. So let me just read out the page. So you can see that you can't access this resource because my IP address is blocked. Now, this is very interesting because my IP range doesn't fall under the range which I've given in this setting, so it doesn't give me access to enter my Dataverse environment, even though I have access to. Now, coming back to our testing mode, if you enable any of your firewalls in audit-only mode, this would make sure that any user who's trying to log in will be entered, and you can also see the data in the audit log. And let me just first try to save it and see if we can try to enter into the environment. Now this is enabled and let me go to the environment and try if I can log in. Let me just try if I can still save it. It generally takes some time, so it takes 5 to 10 minutes as per the documentation. So let's see if it has already kicked in. Yes, so this works. So now we are in testing mode. So we are trying to detect who are the users from which IP addresses they are trying to log in so we can identify a specific range to put in our setting. And coming to their audit logs, there is the audit query which they have given from the documentation, which you can leverage. And let's go to the audit logs from the URL, which you can see here. You can look for the audit table in our API, and then you can see all the values which all the users who are trying to log in. So you can see a JSON format, you can download this and you can make a call of what IP addresses you can try to configure in your setting. You can see I have all my data here and you can see the IP addresses which I have in the IPv4 format. And yep. So this is a cool feature which the Microsoft has recently given us on their new update. And now let's go back to our next topic, which is the CMK. This is also
Okay.
really cool.
So sorry, Hima, before we go to the next topic, so just to recap, right?
Yeah,
The IP firewall rule is to enable specific IP address ranges to have access to certain environments.
correct.
However, you need to be a Power Platform admin, and you also need to have that environment as a managed environment in order to do
Correct.
this. You can also create the rule in detection only mode or in prevention mode.
Yes.
So okay, all right. So it's a really interesting feature, and it's nice to see how Microsoft has started to introduce more granular security into the dataverse. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great feature from Microsoft because earlier we only had in Power Pages and now it's extended to the Power Platform. So that's a good sign of progress from the product team. Hats off to them. And now let's move on to our next topic, which is CMK. Let me go to the slide and try to see. So CMK, the name itself stands for the Customer Managed Encryption Key. So by default, our environments are encrypted by Microsoft by default. But what this means, CMK is basically an customer managed key. So you can manage the key by yourself instead of choosing Microsoft as a service provider. Now, why would one choose CMK? So if you're dealing with clients from public sector or financial sector or any services where the compliance policies are very strict or they have some data policies and data security policies or any prevention, any data prevention techniques. So you can use your CMK to manage your Power Apps, or you can manage your encryption. So it's an additional layer of a data protection to what Microsoft has already given, and you can connect your key from Azure to the Power Apps. Now let's go step by step. There are a couple of steps, so if someone wants to follow, you can follow me, or you can also do it later from the documentation. But let me go to the steps which can be taken from the Key Vault admin and the Power Platform admin. So, and again, this has a couple of prerequisites. So the environment has to be managed, and if it's not managed, then you can't set up your CMK. And also the key which you create in the Azure has to be in the same region your Power Platform environment is. So let's say if you create a key in US region and if your environment is in Europe region, you can't connect that key to the Power Platform environment. So there are a couple of steps here. So we need two people or maybe two resources who are from a dedicated platforms. One is from the Azure and one is from the Power Platform. So from the Azure, we need a person who has the Azure Key Vault admin roles, who can create a key for us. And so in order to create a key vault, we need to have a paid subscription. So if you have any paid subscription and if it has a key vault, then you are good to go. You can create a key for yourself. And then we can create a Power Platform enterprise policy in order to read that key and grant permission accesses to the key vaults. And then once our key is set up and we have the enterprise policy which talks to that key, now the only task left is to grant the Power Platform admins to read that policy, right? So that is also being done from the Azure Key Vault. We will see from the Cloud Shell how we assign the Azure Key Vault, how we assign the policy as a read permission to the Power Platform admin. So the Power Platform admin only has a role where he just has to go to the Power Platform admin center. He can navigate to the enterprise policies and he can edit the policy and he can add his environment to the policy. Now, there's a lot of talk about key vaults in the demo, which will make more interesting. So let me go back to my environment. So let's go to our Azure portal. Just give me a moment. Yep. So if you can see, I have my paid subscription, so I'm good to go. So I can create my Azure Key Vault, and from the Azure Key Vault, I can create my key, and I can do my next steps as I mentioned in my slide. So since I have my subscription, I can create a resource group dedicated to my key. So let me go to the resource group. I already have a couple of resource groups already, but I'll create a new resource group just in order to make sure all my keys are in, for this demo, all my keys are in this resource group. So I'll just put a key name as CMK LinkedIn Live, and I'll just put the name as and the region as Europe, since my region of since my Power Platform admin is in Europe. Let me look for West Europe, and I'll look for the next step, which is tags. I don't need to review anything. I'll just create this resource group. So I can see the resource group is created from my notification bar. I'll just go to resource group. Perfect. So I have my resource group set up correctly. Now all I need to do is I need to make sure whether I do have an Azure Key Vault or not. So just look for Azure Key Vault from your search bar. You can see key vaults. You can just go to a key vaults and you can create a new key vault dedicated to this environment. Let me go ahead and review all the details here. So this is my subscription, which I'm using as a paid subscription. In the resource group, you can create a new group here if you have not created in the first step. but I've already created the resource group, so I can look for the resource group which I've just created. That is CMK LinkedIn Live, and you can give a name to your key. I'll just give my key name as CMK key Lion Live, and this is very important because you need to make sure that key is also in the same region as your environment is. So I'll select it as West Europe, and then I'll click on next. So here you have two policies here, two permission models. So the Azure role-based access control is recommended. So I'll keep it as it is. And if you are someone who wants to create from vault access policy, that's also fine. You can go to the Azure key vaults and then you can choose the vault access policy and you can assign some privileges. I'll talk about this permission model in my next steps. And then I'll just go to the next step here and next and review and create. This will take a couple of minutes. We'll make sure that our key vault is set up correctly. So once that is done, what I'll do is I'll try to create a key in my key vault and then I'll perform the next steps. So once my key vault is created, I need to make sure that I have the purge protection enabled, because if your key what a purge protection would mean is if your key is deleted by any chance, and if you have your purge protection enabled, which means you can retain your key, it will still not be deleted from the servers, so you'll still have an access to the key. So make sure to enable the purge protection once your key vault is created. So deployment is progress. I hope it should be completed in a few seconds.
All right. So while this is running, Hima,
Yep.
just to recap what you've said,
Yeah.
in order to like connect the eventual key that you get out of this into the Power Platform,
Correct.
would we require the Power Platform admin rights to do
Yes, we
that?
would need the Power Platform admin rights in our later steps,
Okay.
because he needs to read the enterprise policy, which we would set up
Mhm.
in order to read the key. So we
Okay.
would need Power Platform admin.
Admin rights. Okay.
Yes, we would need the admin rights. Also from the Azure, we would need the Azure Key Vault admin rights in order to create a key vault and create the keys in the next steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can see our key vault is created. Now let's go to the resource. Just close the notification tab here and you can see our key vault is created successfully. And now let me go to the keys to create a key. So if you see here, uh, let me try to create a key. But before that, I'll just go back one step. You can see the operation is not allowed by RBAC. So in order to give in order to do anything on this key part, I need to give few permissions. And also before that, we will make sure that we enable the purge protection, because that should be my first property to do. Let me just go and find in the properties, and you can see the purge protection here and it's disabled. So we'll just make it enable. So once this is enabled, this cannot be disabled, and which is what we need. Let's click on save. So now we are happy to proceed further, and we are not afraid of losing our key. Even though if we lose, we can still retain it back using our purge protection. Now let's go to keys. And before I go to key, I would like to assign myself the key vault administrator role from the access control. Now, if you remember, I was talking about the RBAC, the role-based access model, and the vault access policy. So if you were choosing the vault access policy, you would go to the access policies here and you would see a page to assign some roles here. So right now I don't have it access. Right now the access policies are not available to myself because I've chosen the role-based access control. So I would need to go to my access control IAM page. So if you see here, I can check my roles, what roles have been assigned. So I've already been assigned, though I'm not assigned to any of the roles. So let me just go and add a role assignment here. So first, I look for a role which is Azure Key Vault Administrator. I can see the Key Vault Administrator here. I'll just select it and I'll go to the next tab. I'll see the user. I'll select the member who the Key Vault role has to be assigned, and I'll select this and click on next, and I'll review, and I can see it's a Key Vault Administrator and is assigned to this resource group scope. Perfect. Select review plus assign. Yep. So now you can see that I've been assigned as a Key Vault Administrator. That's fine. And now the next step is for me to create the key. So let me go back to the keys to quickly create a RSA key, which I can use it for the CMK. And I'll put the key name as CMK RSA key. And rest all options, you can leave it as it is, and you can click on create. So you can see the key is enabled, and we would need to view the key. So you can see the key identifier and also the permitted operations here, which is perfect. And let's go back. So we'll come to this page again in order to view the JSON format because I would need the key ID and the key name. So I'll just make sure that I'm storing my details somewhere on the notepad. Let me just, so this is my resource ID and this would be my key name. Perfect. Now let's go back to the access control, and I would need to still assign few roles as part of my deployment. So let's go to the role assignment and add the role assignments. And I would need the resource policy contributor and then key vault crypto officer in order to manage access and view the keys. So let me go for crypto, key value crypto officer, and select the member whom I need to assign. I'll just review and assign. And there's also another role which I would need to assign, and that would be resource policy contributor. Perfect. Now we have our keys created. Now the next steps are to create an enterprise policy in order to read our key and perform the next steps. So first we need to make sure whether our subscription has the Power Platform as a service provider. So let's go to the subscription we are using. So I'll go to the subscriptions and to subscription. And if you can scroll down, you would see the resource providers and just go to the resource provider and make sure you have the Microsoft.Power Platform. So I've already registered it before. So it's a one-time step. So you don't need to do this every time whenever you're trying to register the Key Vault. So once you select this and click on register, you can use it for any of the other key vaults. So mine is registered. If you are someone who's trying to configure, just try to register this as a resource provider. Now let's go back to the subscriptions. So now my next step is to create an enterprise policy. So I would need to create an enterprise policy using a custom template. So I'll search for deploy a custom template. So you can see there are a couple of options you can use, but right now I'm focusing on build your own template in the editor. So I can give my values such as my key ID and the key name. So it already has some JSON format, but I'm not interested in this. And also the Microsoft official document has a JSON view, and it has given us the inputs and the parameters which we need to assign. So I'll go to I can show you the JSON template as well. So you can copy your JSON template from here. All you need to do is you need to mention your enterprise policy name. So this policy name will be visible in your Power Platform admin center. When the admin tries to assign the environment to a key, you would see this name. And then this is the location which would be created, which would be mentioned here, because if you mention it as US or any other region, then you can't apply that to your Power Platform environment. And then you have your key vault ID, which I copied in my previous steps, and the key name. So let me go back to the notepad where I already have the JSON template. Just try to maximize it. So I'll just try to put the name as CMKLIN life. This is my policy name. And then I would need to mention the location since my tenant is in Europe and my environment is also hosted in Europe. I'll choose as Europe. And my key vault ID would be this. And my key name would be CMK Keen Life. So we are good with our template to build a new enterprise policy. So let's copy this JSON and go back to our portal and try to replace this value here. Perfect. Make sure there are no errors on the screen. And you can see the name as CMK Line Live. And this is our policy name. I'll click on Save. So you need to choose your resource group. So my resource group is CMK LinkedIn Live, which I've created. And my region is West Europe. Perfect. And next, and I'll just create it. It'll take a couple of seconds. So let's wait. So it's already created now. Perfect. And let's go back. Let's go back to our portal. Now we have created the enterprise policy, but I would need the ID of the enterprise policy in order to give the read permissions. So the enterprise policy has to read the key. So in order to do that, we first need to have the ID of the enterprise policy. Now let's go to the Resource Graph Explorer where we can get the enterprise ID. So in this Resource Graph Explorer, you can query lot many tables and you can get some data out of those tables. So right now I'm only focusing on a particular table which will give me the ID. So if you can just search for Microsoft.powerplatform/enterprise policies and you can select this and you can choose the table. The SQL query, you can just run the query and you would see all the enterprise policies which I've created or which were created in the past. So if you can see, I've created this CMK LIN live just few seconds back, and this is the ID I'm focusing on. So once I have this ID, I'll just try to note it down here. This is my enterprise policy. Perfect. So once I have my enterprise policy, now I can give the read privileges to this policy in order to read the key. So for that, we need to go to the Azure PowerShell. So let's open the PowerShell. So once this is connected, we will make sure that we will assign our Power Platform admin the read privileges to this enterprise policy. So before going there, there's a key step here. We also need to know our object ID of the user. So let me go to the environments and sorry, let me go to the portal. I'll duplicate this tab and I'll go to the Entra where I can find all users. Let me go to the users and search for my user. So if you can see, I have the object ID here. I'll copy this and I'll put it in the notepad, which I'll be using later. I'll just put the object ID here. Let's see if our Cloud Shell is connected. It's connected. So there is a command already available on the document. So you can refer to the official document and you can copy this command. So here there are three things to take care of. You need to replace the object ID and the enterprise policy resource ID. So let's copy this and replace our values. Our object ID is the user ID. I'll copy this value here. I'll replace it here. And my EP resource ID would be this. I'll replace the scope here. And I'll try to run this command in order to make sure that I have the read privileges to the enterprise policy which we just created. Let's hit on enter.
Mm.
Yeah, this is the last step, fine, so I'm cautious of the
Yeah.
time.
No, 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 no. It looks good. I was just saying. I wanted to say, do we keep our fingers crossed now? Because I know that when you want to run something, that's
Yes,
sometimes you get an error.
it's
But this
always,
went very
yeah,
quickly, so that's good.
correct. Yes, so I
Yeah.
have the reader privilege as well assigned here. So all my steps are perfectly done here. Now the task is for the Power Platform admin to go to the environment and assign the policy. So if you can see here, you'll have a tab called as policies where you can go to the enterprise policies and you will see all the policies which were created from the Azure portal. So this is the policy which we created few minutes back, and you can click on edit policy. So before that, you need to make sure that your environment is managed and also it's in the same region. So my Azure region is Europe. So when I click on add environments, you'd only see the environments from the Europe region. So if you can see, all the environments are by default managed. All the environments are by default encrypted by Microsoft Managed Key. Now I'm trying to make sure that my environment should be encrypted by my customer managed key. So choose the environment which you want to manage and click on continue and then click on save. So once you click on save, it would say that your environment will be offline during some time and it can take 2 days. And once you click on confirm, you would see that your environment is encrypted by your customer managed key. So that's pretty much from the CMK. It's a really cool feature for clients who have stringent data security policies and wants to encrypt data by their own keys. That's it point from the CMK perspective.
Yeah.
And let me just stop sharing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hima, for the detailed demo. It was really interesting to see how you got the keys created in Azure. And I'm sure that a lot of us also enjoyed looking at that, especially those of us that are coming from a heavy Power Platform background. So just going into
Correct.
Azure and seeing how to manipulate the settings, the configurations, get the JSON out and put it into the CLI as well was really, really useful.
Yeah.
And then taking everything back into the into the Power Platform. So thank you so much for the session today. Thank you for
Yeah.
spending some of your time to talk to us again about enhancing Power Platform security. So the recording session will be available for anyone who missed part of it or you like to just rewatch, and also on the previous editions of FOB Fridays with FOB. I've spoken about all of these things that Hima just brought to life now. So if you want some helpful links and videos to go over, all of those are in the previous content, and we'll also post them again here for you on the chat. All right. That said,
Yeah.
I want to thank you once again for everyone who joined us today and for Hima again. Amazing presentation, very detailed, very concise. It was good to see the demos as well. Thank you for sparing your time and to join me today. And with that, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Perfect. Thanks everyone joining live and see you again. Thank you.